happy mid-January. Today, I want to bring you a very practical, actionable episode about 1099s. So if you are not aware, I hope you are, but if you're not aware, the IRS requires that if you paid any contractors, if you paid anyone in the course of your business throughout the prior year, the IRS requires you to issue them a 1099 to report any amounts over $600 that you paid. This is super, super important because this is actually one of the key areas of interest of the IRS. It is one of their goals to crack down on unreported cash income. This makes sense, right? They're our tax collection agency. They're interested in making sure that all payments, income payments, are reported, right? And taxed appropriately. So it's fair. So the IRS requires that we send out 1099s to anyone we paid over $600 for the year by January 31st. It's very important to know that as soon as it's past that deadline, you will be assessed daily penalties for your failure to file. And I will say this as a tax practitioner, a lot of people, historically sort of just wouldn't do it, wouldn't file their 1099s. They thought they somehow didn't need to or were an exception. And so the purpose of this episode today for you is to really make sure you know that, in fact, you do need to do it. I will talk about some of the exceptions where you might not need to, but you should assume you do. And the other thing I want you to understand is that this is such a heavy and important focus area for the IRS that the trend is that the IRS is continuing to lock down and increase the penalties. So the penalties this year are stiffer than the penalties last year. If you ever have, sort of gotten away with it, managed to skate by without issuing 1099s to people you were supposed to, do not assume that you can do that forever or that you should ever do it again, right? You should actually do it. And I will also say this, there is a checkbox on your Schedule C. So if you work for yourself, if you're self-employed, this is also true if you're an S Corp or any other corporate formation, but for the purposes of this podcast, most of you listening are filing a Schedule C. There is a checkbox on the Schedule C that says, did you make any payments that would require the filing of a 1099? And did you issue that 1099 or those 1099s? So you are attesting to the fact that you are aware of this rule and you have complied with the law when you file your tax return. You need to be aware of this because that is the box that will catch you. That is the box that says, yes, I am aware of this and I did what I was supposed to. So if you didn't, then we know you lied on your tax return. Okay. So you really want to be careful. Anytime there's a checkbox like that in your tax return, please understand it means the IRS is looking very carefully and they have, once you check that checkbox, you've signed your name to that document, they have a way to come after you. Okay. Not to be too scary, but it's very real. It's right there on the first page of your Schedule C, that checkbox. I'm just looking at it right now. And if you hire an accountant, you don't get around this. In fact, that accountant should not sign their name to your tax return and will not, if they're a licensed person, they will not sign their name to your tax return if you have any 1099s you have not issued. So that is the forcing point. That is the forcing mechanism. That IRS comes down on us, the people who are licensed by them, or CPAs or state licensed, but still they are licensed. The IRS comes after us to help us ensure that you file the paperwork you're legally required to file, and we are not allowed to sign our names to your tax return. We are not allowed to file your tax return if that is not legally taken care of, right? If you haven't issued your tax returns. Okay, so let's talk about how that works. How do you handle your 1099s? Okay. So there was a little shift in 2020 where we changed the names. 1099s got a little makeover and they got a name change. So you might have grown used to the 1099 MISC, which stood for miscellaneous. And I think that's a little confusing. And so they kind of nailed down a little better the one that most of you receive, which is the 1099 NEC, which stands for non-employee compensation. What's really important to know here is employees are paid through a W-2. They have automated withholding. There's a whole bunch of employment law that kind of touches and regulates how employees get paid. When you're paid as a contractor, you are not an employee. So you can think of the NE on your 1099 NEC as not an employee. So 1099 NEC, that's the one you're going to get, a lot of them probably. If you do freelance work, that's the one you're going to be getting. There are other kinds of 1099s, FYI. There's 1099s INT, which report your interest. There's 1099Ks, and we'll actually talk about those today because those you'll get from third-party payment processors. All right? Okay. The basic rules of issuing 1099 NECs, which I'm now going to just call 1099s, but please note I'm talking specifically about the NEC, is that you need to file one for any contractor you paid over $600 in the calendar year, okay? And know that when you issue a 1099 to a contractor, one copy goes to that contractor and the other copy goes to the IRS, okay? So this is third-party verification. The IRS knows that person earned the income, and that person sees what got reported to the IRS. And of course, it's their legal obligation to report it on their tax return. Now, I know a lot of people stress out about the fact that they know that they are paying people who don't want to report their income. I just want to be here as the tax professional to remind you, it's their legal obligation to report their income, and it is your legal obligation to issue the 1099s you're required to issue. So you need to follow the law, no matter what the intention of the person on the other side of that is, okay? So don't you break the law because you know the person on the other side of the transaction wants to or intends to break the law. That really is not an excuse. You're still checking that checkbox and signing your name to your tax return. You still have to issue your 1099s. Let that person deal with it. Hopefully they, have that come to Jesus moment that they need to and recognize that this is how we operate our country. If you don't like the laws, I hope you're out there advocating for better ones. That is the other side of paying taxes in a democracy. Okay, so again, one copy goes to the IRS, one copy goes to your contractor, and you have to file them by January 31st, or the next day if that happens to fall on a weekend. So January is your time, everybody. You will accrue penalties and daily interest for every day you're late past January 31st, issuing those 1099s. Now, why does that deadline come so far ahead of the tax deadline? Because people need to receive all their 1099s in order to do their taxes. In other words, people are waiting for you to issue those 1099s before they can file their own tax return. The same is true for you if you received any, okay? There are a couple reasons that you might not need to issue a 1099. You don't need to issue one to anybody that you paid by credit or debit card, interestingly. Why? Because those third parties are now responsible for reporting the payment. And so those parties actually take on the burden of the paperwork and they issue a 1099K to the recipient. Okay, so you basically transfer the admin burden if you use a credit or debit card. Also, if you pay similarly through PayPal Business, Cash App Business, any of these ones where you're deliberately saying, yes, this is for goods and services, this is for business. Though if you pay someone through that mechanism, then you also transfer this administrative burden to the third-party payment processor. This is kind of great, right? It is one of the wonderful things. I know some people don't like to see the fees, but this is what those fees are paying for. It's for issuing 1099s. Right. So, you want to follow the law at all times. If you're actually paying for goods and services, you should check that it's for goods and services. All right. Okay. I do want to warn you that there are some organizations like Zelle or Venmo Personal. I think Venmo is going through a lot of transition at this moment. They did not used to issue 1099s. It was not considered a third-party payment processor. And so if you paid for someone through Venmo or Zelle, it did not meet this burden and you would need to issue them a 1099. You want to assume that that is the case until Venmo gets it together and has a business side. They may have that operational now and they may not. I'm not actually sure. You also don't need to issue a 1099 to anyone who is an S corporation or a C corporation, regardless of the payment method. And this is because those people have other regulations that affect them, and therefore the 1099 for them is less necessary. They have a stiffer filing requirement, and so the IRS is a lot less worried about S corps and C corps not reporting their cash income. Now, who are they worried about not reporting their cash income? The little guy, which is why the little guy is who you definitely do need to issue the 1099 to. Okay, so interestingly, there are some special rules for attorneys. I try to keep my commentary to a minimum here, but it's clearly a non-trusting relationship between the IRS and attorneys. I don't know what the evidence bears out here. I'm not privy to it. But you need to issue a 1099 to any attorney that you pay for services rendered to your business. Now, important note, that services rendered to your business. So if you pay an attorney to write some contracts for you, et cetera, review contracts for your business, yes, that is a business transaction. Now, if you're suing your neighbor, right, that's personal. And so then you do not need to issue that attorney a 1099. So remember, this is business, but not personal. There are some more detailed rules about attorneys. I'm going to save those since I think a lot of you probably are not paying a lot of attorneys, but I do have more information in that in my more extensive 1099 course. All right, ACH transfers. So an ACH transfer is generally like paying with cash or check. So it means that you do need to issue a 1099 to someone that you pay this way. But if you use the ACH function through a third-party payment processor, so like PayPal, for example, PayPal Business, and not straight from your bank account, so then that will be included in that 1099-K issued by that third-party payment processor, like PayPal Business, for example. Okay. All right. So there is a little bit of news about the new 1099-K reporting threshold for 2024 and beyond. Pre-2024, third-party payment processors only had to report income or send out 1099-Ks if a person had over 200 transactions or made over $20,000 in revenue paid out from that third-party payment processor, okay? In other words, the threshold for reporting for a 1099-K was way higher than the $600 threshold of a 1099 NEC. You can imagine this creates some confusion. There's a huge gap between $600 and $20,000. So Congress is trying to make it simpler and sync up these two rules, okay? Now, it was the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 actually is the law that synced up these two rules so that they would be the same. And under this new rule, 1099-Ks are now, rather than being issued only at the threshold of 200 transactions or $20,000, they now need to be issued to anyone who sold products or services and made over $600. In other words, syncing them up with the same threshold of the 1099 NEC. However, this change was meant to go in effect in 2022, and it would have changed the reporting requirements for 1099-Ks for last year's taxes. However, the third-party payment processors fought the change. They said they needed more time to create new systems, et cetera, and they got it extended for a year. So last year, this law had not yet gone into effect. It was meant to go into effect January 1st, 2024. Well, guess what? They fought for another year. This is the ultimate, like, I'm late on my homework, I need an extension. So they fought for another year and the IRS did grant it to them. So this law is coming. I would predict by 2025, they are not going to be allowed any more extensions and this law will actually take effect. But for 2023 taxes, which you'll be doing in 2024, we have one more year where it's not in effect. Okay. So that weird blip in the threshold, huge threshold difference is still in effect now. The laws will eventually sync up. Okay. I do want you to know, though, that states are different. There are at least 4 states that did implement this change. So interestingly, this means effectively that those third-party payment processors really do need to get their paperwork in order, because they are going to need to issue anyone living in Maryland, Massachusetts, Vermont, Virginia, and several others. They will still need to issue those 1099-Ks at that $600 amount to residents of those states. So I imagine that these third-party payment processors are going to get on board this year. That's my guess. All right. So I want to give you some tips on filing your 1099 NECs. Okay. So the best practice is, before you ever pay someone for your business, have that person fill out a W-9. Okay. The W-9 does not get sent to the IRS. The W-9 actually stays in your own records, okay? So you want to save it somewhere secure. Remember that a W-9 has people's identifiable information on it. It has their social security number, and it might even have their bank account number. So you need to practice good security with the W-9s that you ask people to fill out. Never have somebody email you a filled out W-9. They should mail it in an envelope that is secure, or send it through Dropbox or some other system that is encrypted, okay? But what you want to do is, anytime you pay somebody to do work in your business, whether it's maybe a product photographer, maybe it is a graphic designer, a web designer, whatever it is that you pay for in your business, you want to get that person to fill out a W-9 for you. Now, what's interesting is, sometimes what the W-9 tells you is that you don't need to issue that person a 1099, but it's the legal document that shows that you know that, right? So it actually serves, this W-9 will serve as your proof in case the IRS says, hey, you paid this person, but you didn't issue them a 1099. Well, if you can produce the W-9 that you got back from them that has the box for S corporation checked, then you can say to the IRS, hey, yeah, but it was okay because they're an S corp, and here's my proof that I know that. Okay, so that's really, really important. I'm asked to fill out W-9s all the time, but I'm an S corp, and nobody needs to give me 1099s. A lot of organizations, even with pretty fancy accounting departments, do not know this rule, and they end up sending me 1099s anyway, and it's super annoying because I have to write a whole explanation on my tax return every year about why I'm canceling out these 1099s, because they're already reported in my S corp reporting. All right. The W-9, the other role of the W-9 is to give you all the information that you need to be able to file the 1099 that you're legally required to file, if you are, okay? So this isn't that much information. It's not burdensome to the other person. It gives you their legal name, their mailing address, their social security number or EIN, and there's a residency question for tax withholding purposes. It's very important. If this person is not a foreign national, if they're not a U.S. citizen or resident, that's actually really important for you to know, because it affects what paperwork you need to file. And it may indicate that you actually have to have some additional paperwork if they are an international person, not a U.S. resident. Your point of leverage is to get this paperwork, get this W-9 before you pay them. If you've ever worked for another organization on contract, you know that you are not getting paid until you return the W-9. And often the only thing that prompts you returning the W-9 is the fact that they're withholding your payment until you give it to them, right? Well, you can take a page out of this playbook, and you also can withhold payment to your contractors until you get that W-9 back. It's actually really, really important for you to have it, because it's giving you your legal boxes all checked, so that if that person happens to move 3 times in the course of the next year and you lose track of them, that you're not then accidentally put in the position of breaking the law, because you can't find them and you cannot issue a 1099 to them when you're supposed to, okay? So get that W-9 from every contractor. All right, next on the practical, for the practical part, you want to do your bookkeeping for 2023. And then if your bookkeeping is on software, then you want to run a report to make a list of all the payments you made to contractors and attorneys. And if you did it manually, then you just want to tally up all the, again, contractors or attorneys that you paid throughout the year. Basically, my recommendation to you is that you make a list of all the contractors you paid over $600 and then whittle down the list, because some of those people you will not actually need to file a 1099 for because of the exceptions I've talked about in this episode. And so you get that master list and then you start crossing off the people you don't actually need to issue a 1099 to, okay? So did you pay them by credit card? Did you get a W-9 and you realize that they're an S corporation or a C corporation? Things like that. This will get you your ultimate list of the people you do owe 1099s to. And your report, your bookkeeping, is there to show you the totals that you paid to them, okay? If you didn't get a W-9 from your contractors before you paid them, you will need to get one now. You're late. It would have been better to get it originally, but you can still do it after the fact, okay? So you can still ask for them to fill out a W-9 now. And in fact, you're going to need to. It's not a legal requirement that you get a W-9. It's just very helpful. You can get all the information, like their address, their legal name, their social security number. You can get it by just asking them. But if you have them fill out a W-9, you know you're getting everything. So that's why the W-9 is really the gold standard, okay? And just remember, when you ask people to give you back a W-9, do not ask them to email it. You should never email a social security number. Have them pop it into an envelope. And if you really want to make things simple for them, you can mail them a self-addressed stamped envelope so that it's super easy. There are also online electronic services that will ask somebody for their W-9 information and be able to send it encrypted and securely back to you. And I have lots of those recommendations that I will be offering in the upcoming class I'm giving to people inside Money Bootcamp. All right, so to summarize, the rules are shifting somewhat on 1099s. Basically, they're steady. The sort of baseline is if you paid someone over $600 for your business, not for personal stuff, then you owe them a 1099. There are some exceptions, and you should take note of what those exceptions are, but basically assume that you owe a 1099 to any contractor you paid over $600 in the calendar year. These rules can feel confusing, but what I want you to remember is the due date is January 31st. You need to make sure you do your bookkeeping and get these 1099s issued by the deadline of January 31st because penalties and interest kick in the day after that. And now you know the rules, okay? Now, if you are interested in a more explicit how-to, including links to places that I like to go for those electronic W-9 filings and for very, very fast and electronic 1099 issuing, I am giving a live workshop to the people inside my program, Money Bootcamp, on Tuesday, January 18th. It is a live 1099s training where I will be teaching all the rules, giving a written outline and links to the resources that I recommend. And if you're in Money Bootcamp, you're already registered for that. We'll be sending out notifications so that you have the link to join on the 18th. And if you're interested in joining Money Bootcamp and you realize this is one of those things that would really be helpful for you to keep yourself on track and accountable in your business, I welcome you to join me. You can go to sunlighttax.com/moneybootcampimpact, and you can join Money Bootcamp, and you will also be invited to that workshop that I'm giving for bootcamp members. So in any case, whether you're in bootcamp or not, I hope that this 1099s episode has been helpful in getting you aware of the upcoming 1099s deadline, the basics of what you need to do, and getting you started. All right. See you next week, everybody. Bye. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm so grateful for that. This video is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links I reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.